Hey, Awesomes. Welcome back. We'll talk a little bit more about the APA 7th edition formatting specifically. We'll talk a little bit about especially these 6 items we've got right here on our week 5 page. So for this assignment, I say use the student formatting. You don't need to write an abstract for your proposal or even worry about the running head for this particular. We'll get this assignment. We'll get into those and use those for our APA style research paper when we get there. Right now, we just this will help us just lay the foundation for kind of take it a step at a time instead of trying to do all at one time. 3 major sections to your paper, which I mentioned in the week 5 overview video: your title page, the body, and your references page. And the body of the proposal should have your introduction, plan of work, and conclusion, which I talked about also in the week 5 overview video, just by way of friendly reminder. Number 4, APA style does prefer less in-text quoting. It prefers paraphrasing with attribution, in-text citation at the end of the sentence. So rather than feeling like you have to quote from every single one of your resources, you could be talking about an overall theory that the author or authors are using. So you would just make sure that you have attribution to that according to authors' last names, right, and the year. And then paraphrase what they say. And then perhaps at the end of that sentence, you would have a page number reference, right, to where that kind of that idea, that concept, right, that you're borrowing from, not quoting word for word, but you would paraphrase that. The list of sources at the end of your paper, number 5 here, I'm sorry. The list of sources at the end of your paper is called references as opposed to works cited, which is an MLA. So APA calls them references. And references are always in alphabetical order. And they also have that hanging indentation, which we'll also talk about. So let's take a deeper dive. And then just by way of friendly reminder, too, in addition to these videos, obviously you've got the 7th edition formatting resources. And then Grizz writes Chapter 16. Professor Nugent at our university does a really, really good job talking about the importance of citation, kind of how it works, what it does, and then also talks about the differences between APA and MLA. It's a really short chapter. It's really, really, really informative. And we'll be explicating a lot of the ideas that he has as well as we talk about this more later on. So make sure you've got your, obviously, week 5 to-dos. All right, you're watching these videos, hopefully. Okay. And then obviously watch the APA 7th edition formatting resources videos. And then, of course, read the short selection from Grizz Writes this week, Chapter 16. And then obviously you're working on your research proposal. But to dive in real quick here to look at the what we're kind of looking at for the student paper for the APA 7th edition. I'm on the Purdue OWL, and I'll include this page, excuse me, link to you on our week 5 page. But this kind of gives you a snapshot, if you will. So here is your title page, right? You've got your title, right? Something other than Project 1 research proposal, right? Have something that really encapsulates what it is that you're going to be talking about. Then you will have, let's see, your name. Okay. In this case, it would just be one name, right? So we would have here the Department of Writing and Rhetoric, Oakland University, WRT 1060, Composition 2. Just put my name, Corey Hamilton, and then the date. Okay. And then you go to page 2, right? Notice the page number here, right? In the upper right-hand corner. Page number 1 is up there. Put your title in again, and then for the introduction, you don't need a heading. So you just dive right in, okay? Write your introduction, and then, of course, obviously page 3, and you're typing along. And, of course, obviously this is a longer paper. So, but then when you get to a section, right, that is different than your the introduction, right? So for us, it's going to be plan of work. So you'd center it right here in bold. And then these are subheadings along that are justified left. So think about our plan of work. We could have 2 subheadings, right? One could be primary research, Another subheading could be secondary research, right? So you could have two subheadings there. And then obviously when you get to your conclusion, it would be centered and bold, as well as a really long paper. So let's see if we can, obviously yours is not going to be this long for this one, but whenever you change major sections, it is centered and bold. So obviously these headings will come into play in our research paper, but conclusion would be your last one. And so if you want to look through this example too, it does a really, 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 really visually helps. It helps me anyway. I hope it helps you see how APA style is written and kind of done, especially when it comes to citations, right? So you'll notice that there are citations here, right? Howard, 1985, for instance, finds right? And then there's a citation. And notice here, there's a lot of paraphrasing about what these authors are saying or talking about, right? You don't see, one thing that I just kind of wanted to note to you is not a lot of quotation marks. But there are citations because they're the student, and what we are going to try to get better at, right, and practice this semester is using the ideas, right? So if we're thinking about a lot of this would probably come the majority of, right, in our introduction, or maybe more specifically, probably our background section. So recall when we reviewed the student sample paper last week, we talked about that, right? In the background section, we're probably really going to be using the majority of your sources because you're providing background information about your particular topic and you want to bring in support from your resources. So you have your sources that you will have, and this APA 7 student paper on the Purdue L is really helpful in seeing, kind of looking at it visually, that there are very few, but here, here's one, right? So you think about the last 2 or 3 paragraphs, as I was just kind of scrolling right there, you see citations, but then every so often, right, you see some quotation marks, but here is, so they're talking about a study done by these authors here, and here's what they found, right? Here are the results of that particular study, right, or that information perhaps. So if you're thinking about putting this in a background context and say, according to, or a paper written by these authors here, demonstrated or show or reveal or quantify or qualify or whatever those particular authors are doing, let's say, show that, and then add the information, right? Not word for word, but you paraphrase then what it is those authors were talking about in relation to that provide background information more specifically, right, for your paper. And then you would just give the attribution, right? Here's a particular one. Here's a particular style. We're in the middle of the sentence, right? Instead of they didn't mention the author, so they put them in the quotation marks. And then recall another good way to do that is in the example that we looked at down here. So let's scroll back down and look at that example. So right here, Howard, 1985, for instance, finds that blah, 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 blah. So Howard found something, right? And they're using that information. And so they mention the author in the sentence, and then the year goes in the parentheses, where if you didn't mention the authors, then you would put the author's name and the year in the parentheses. So one thing to kind of note about this too, while we're talking about it, is APA is very, very, very heavy on when they think about their citation, the year, right? The date, when was it published? So how recent is the information, right? So a lot of times when we talk about research, which we talk a little bit about in 1050, is try to find research, within the last 5, 10, years. Not saying that we're not going to have resources that are older than that, because there'll be some quintessential resources, perhaps, that really solidify your topic. Maybe they were written in 1985 or 1972 or something. But what the year emphasis does, or when things were written, and Professor Nugent talks about this as well, is are we only using older resources, or have we tapped into some resources that are more current? It really helps us as researchers to think about how old or recent, and then we want to think about relevancy, right? How relevant is that information still relevant? Some of those quintessential text, right, about your topic are going to be relevant still today. Some of them might not be, but make sure as you survey and look at your resources and sources, as you go down, especially your references page, what are the years, right? How old are they? Most of them are, the majority of them still within about the last 5-10 years or so, or are all of them 25, 30 years old, right? And that just more than anything gives us a kind of a research gut check to make sure that we are bringing in current and relevant resources for what we're talking about, what we're saying. All right, guys, I'll wrap this up now. So that gives you some of the basics to think about as you're putting your APA style research proposal together this week. And so we'll talk more about that. If you have any questions, just let me know, and we'll go from there. I wish you all most